Hi, this is David Miller, and I'm here with the first in a series of mini-lectures on Shakespeare's Much Ado About Nothing. Today we're going to talk about the structure of the plot. The basic pattern of the action in this play combines two familiar story types. There's a virtuous lady falsely accused story, which is the main plot, and a scorners of love fall in love story, which forms the subplot. The main plot, then, is the wooing and slandering of Hero. That's Don John's plot. And the subplot is the merry war between the killer bees, and that is the plot that Don Pedro presides over. The action involving Dogberry and the watch is not a subplot. It's part of the main plot, a crucial part, in fact, since it triggers the recognition and the reversal of fortunes, which make up the climax of the main action. So how does this double storyline contribute to the overall meaning of the play? There are many ways of answering this question, because similarities and differences between the two plot lines invite us to compare and contrast, and this activity can generate a wide range of insights. The range becomes even wider when we notice that the scenes with Dogberry and the watch also reflect the main plot, though they do so at odd angles and in comically distorted ways. Here are a couple of examples of the way that this plot structure can generate meaning. This is a simple illustration. The situation as the play opens suggests that a principal theme will be love and war, or perhaps love as war. Beatrice's remarks about Benedick are so cutting that Leonato feels compelled to offer the confused messenger an explanation. "You must not, sir, mistake my niece," he says. "There is a kind of merry war betwixt Signor Benedick and her. They never meet, but there's a skirmish of wit between them." From the start, then, their love takes the form of verbal combat. Among all the ways we might see this theme played out, consider the scene in which Benedick and Beatrice first confess that they love one another. Hero has just been publicly humiliated by Claudio, and Beatrice is weeping with rage. When Benedick offers to comfort her with gallantry, "Come, bid me do anything for thee," her response is simple, direct, and deadly. Kill Claudio. At the very moment, then, in which mutual scorn between the two is converting to mutual love, their merry war promises to end in a real death, one that would in fact make it more lethal than the supposedly earnest wars from which the lords are returning as the play opens. If you're looking at the pattern of the action, this moment stands out because it's the place where the storylines cross. In order to gain the love of Beatrice, and thus resolve the subplot, Benedick must challenge Claudio, intervening in the main plot. Our second example involves what Stephen Greenblatt, in his introduction to Much Ado in the Norton edition, calls the code of shame and honor that governs the social world of the play. This code, notes Greenblatt, not only governs the slandering of Hero, but also plays a major role in the mock slandering of Benedick and Beatrice. He describes it this way: "The conspiratorial fabrication of appearances so as to manipulate the code of shame and honor has the odd effect of establishing a link between the socially approved practices of Don Pedro and the wicked practices of Don John, his bastard brother. Shakespeare seems to go out of his way to call attention to this link. Moments after Don Pedro undertakes to fashion the affection between Beatrice and Benedick, the villainous Borachio declares that he will so fashion the matter that Hero shall be absent and hence can be impersonated by Margaret." Now the point here is that we're once again dealing with similarities and differences between the main plot and the subplot. When Greenblatt speaks of the conspiratorial fabrication of appearances so as to manipulate the code of shame and honor, his words are carefully chosen to describe the practices of both brothers. So while we're considering Greenblatt's introduction, let me digress for a little while to notice a couple of other things about the way he's developing his interpretation. First of all, the link that Greenblatt identifies between the socially approved practices of Don Pedro and the wicked practices of Don John. It's important because in other respects the action of the two brothers seems so different, legitimate and illegitimate, like the brothers themselves. Notice, too, that Greenblatt draws back from fully endorsing this judgment. He doesn't call the plots wicked and virtuous, but wicked and socially approved. Approved, that is, by the social world of the play. As 20th century readers, we may be unlikely to condemn Don Pedro's prank as wicked, but we are free to view it critically, and Greenblatt goes on to do just that. Now, the detail that calls attention to this link is the repeated use of a particular verb, fashion, in a special sense. In his introduction, Greenblatt develops a number of perceptive points about the play by using this word and the special cluster of meanings it draws together as a kind of interpretive clue. In this respect, I think his critical practice bears comparison with that of Harry Berger in the assigned article for this play. So having spotted this significant word, Greenblatt recognizes that it has been repeated in a meaningful way. The two uses are located close together, and they mirror the parallel between the play's two plot lines, for the word is being used as the principal verb that describes what each plotter will do. He will fashion things to produce a certain outcome. Greenblatt then draws on the full range of the word's meanings to suggest an important thematic significance for this parallel. When the meanings of fashion as both a noun and a verb are taken together, he proposes, the word characterizes key elements of the social system represented by the play. It's worth noticing that this word turns up again in Act 3, Scene 3, where the watch apprehend but scarcely comprehend Borachio and Conrad. In another bit of comic overhearing and misunderstanding, they hear Borachio declare what a deformed thief this fashion is, and think deformed is the name of a third villain these two are conspiring with. As always, in the scenes of low comedy, Shakespeare is offering a burlesque or parody of the main plot. As a deformed thief, fashion turns young hot bloods into fantastic shapes, and thus robs them of their proper selves. Not a bad analogy for the effects that the stylings of the Don brothers have on the main characters in both plotlines. What Greenblatt terms the social system includes both the virtuous and the evil characters, and it provides a common basis in the interplay of shame and honor for both the benevolent plot of the legitimate brother and the malevolent plot of the illegitimate brother. Recognizing this underlying system and understanding how it works can take us beyond the superficial contrast between a cartoon villain and his innocent victims. This was the contrast toward which Greenblatt implied his skepticism when he called Don Pedro's plot socially approved rather than virtuous or benevolent. Such a recognition allows us to develop a more active and independent understanding, a critical understanding in the best sense, of the play's world and its characters. In the terms Greenblatt uses to close his introduction, this kind of analysis helps us see beyond the illusion that the play fashions on one level, but on another level exposes. The illusion that evil manifests itself as Don John, that is, in a supremely incompetent and finally impotent form, and that it may be exposed by an idiot like Dogberry. One implication of this view is that Shakespearean comedy is complex because it offers such different kinds of pleasure. The very real comic delight that comes from seeing a villain exposed by a fool, but also, along with it, the more sophisticated intellectual pleasure that comes from seeing past that comic delight to recognize how it's propped up by a simplistic and thoroughly inadequate morality. This combination of naive and sophisticated pleasures is one of the qualities that makes Shakespearean comedy so distinctive. Next time, we'll see how the pattern of the action unfolds through the first 5 scenes of the play.